Thank you for tuning in to a Bukkit setup tutorial. So in this tutorial we will be setting up a Bukkit server. How you use the server is up to you. I don't know, you could be messing around with your friends, use it for mini games, survival, SMP, so basically whatever you want. So my little workspace here, I will show you how to create a server. So let me close that. Alright, so first of all, before anything, I suggest that this is how I do it, is we create a folder, and for the tutorial we'll call it new server. Alright, so we made our file, or our folder. So this is going to be the root directory of everything the server runs on. So in here we'll have the startup script, where you click and it turns the server on. We'll also have craftbukkit.jar, which is the base of everything. So first we need to download craftbukkit.jar. So you'll see right now 1.7 isn't completely completed on Bukkit. It's not the recommended build yet. But right here you can see we can download 1.7.2. So I'm going to click alternate versions, and you'll see right here the beta build. I tend to go for the beta build if it's not out on recommended. Development build is a little more unstable than beta build, and if you want most players to join, then get the beta build right now. Alright, so now we click keep this file. I'm downloading it right now. So once that's done, we will put the craftbukkit.jar file into our server directory right here in the folder new server. Alright, so next we need to right click and go down to new, and then we need to make a new text document, and we're going to call this run. So now we've opened it up in Notepad, and I suggest only using Notepad to do this part, and we're going to go to the Bukkit Wiki website, and I'll have a link to the downloads here and the setting up a server Bukkit Wiki here, so you can copy this code. Alright, so I copied it, and we just paste it in there, and I'll go over what this does. So your server is going to run with command prompt, and that's default on any Windows computer. So this tells Java, which you will have to have installed to run a server, and it tells Java that, hey, we're going to use you to make a Minecraft server. And here, this is our RAM. So 1024, that's 1 gigabyte. Another way to do that is just delete that and then replace the M with a G, and that stands for 1 gigabyte. But for this, I'm just going to leave it as that. So here, we put in craftbukkit.jar, because this is craftbukkit, and we want to tell it to run craftbukkit for our server. So that's basically it. Now we go down to save as, and you have to do save as, you can't just save it. We go down here and we do all files, and it will be called run.bat. Make sure that it's run.bat, not just run. Save that, and then we can close this, and you'll see it created a new file. So we can delete this old one. Just like that. Alright, yes, make sure we delete it. Alright, so the next step is putting craftbukkit.jar into your server directory. So I've got it right here, and I'll put it into my folder. So you see it has all this extra stuff after it. That is CraftBukkit's way of telling you what version of CraftBukkit it is. Now, it won't work if we just leave it like that, so we need to rename it. And we just need to rename it CraftBukkit. That way, it's craftbukkit.jar. And as we saw in the run, it runs craftbukkit.jar, not just CraftBukkit. So, now that that's done, we click Run, and this will generate all the files. Now, I'm not sure if... Alright, yeah, there we go. So you'll see all of it, everything. It just, it's creating the world right now. Alright, so there we go. That is the first part. Okay, so now that CraftBukkit has generated all of our server files, we can go into what each folder and or file does. So let's start off with server.properties. We'll go ahead and open it up, and this is basically everything for your server. We've got the permission level. Don't change that unless you know what you're doing. I never change it. It's just it has to do with the Bukkit permissions, and not many people use Bukkit permissions. They usually do choose another permissions plugin. We'll be going over plugins in different tutorials. There'll be plugin reviews on our channel. So what we want to make sure we configure first is the server IP. The server IP is the IP that the server will run on, and that's the IP that it will accept players connecting from. So before we do that, make sure your server port is 25565. It can be anything above it or below it, but 25565 is the default, and people don't like to type in the extra colon 25513. Just an example. So for the server IP, we aren't going to change it right now. We're going to close the server first, and you can click the X, but that's not as safe as running stop, because if you type stop, it will save the world. So now we can close it. Alright, and now let's edit the server IP. Alright, so the way we find out what our IP is we open up a command prompt. Alright, and we type in ipconfig. It's all one word, no spaces, and we press enter. Now, the IP that your computer will connect players from is the IPv4 address, and that's mine right there. It'll be blurred out, but for this, for the sake of the tutorial, we're just going to use localhost, which is 127.0.0.1, and localhost means only I will be able to connect to it, only from my computer. So we're just going to save that, and we edited the server IP and the server port. Now, if you are going to use this for localhost, so just you, then there is no reason to edit the server IP or port. So some other things we do, I always do this with 1.7. It announces in the chat when a player gets an achievement, and when it's set to true, it means it will do that. I don't like that, because whenever I use a server, it spams the chat when people do that, so I'll set that to false. Alright, so allow player flight. This means if someone has a fly hack, the server will, if it's found false, the server will check to see if someone is flying that's not supposed to be. So I always leave that as false. But if you are all for hacks and you want the players on your server to be encouraged to use hacks, and you want them to be allowed to use flight, just do true. But for this, I'll leave it as false. It doesn't really matter what it is for this tutorial. Enable query. I'm not really even sure how you pronounce the word, but we'll say enable query. Other websites like to use this. So, like, say you make a banner for your server on an advertising website, which we'll go over all that later on. Some banner websites, they let you put the player list on the actual banner. So it'll say, oh, there's 8 people on your server. 8 out of 10 people are on. So enable query. If that's true, then other websites will be able to do that. If it's false, it won't work. Alright, so game mode. This is the default game mode. So when a new player joins, that's the game mode they'll be in. Right now, 0, that's survival. So we'll leave it as that. Enable command block. Let's turn it to true. We don't really need to, but it just true turns on command blocks and false leaves them off. So we can also do generate structures. This means that the server will or will not create villages, dungeons, witch huts, nether fortresses, all that stuff. So the view distance, don't edit that too severely because that will cause your server to crash if you change it too rapidly to a different number. So just be careful around that. And the max players here, this one is how many players will be allowed on your server at a time. So for now, we're going to set that to 1 because it's just me. Alright, so the difficulty. The difficulty is peaceful, easy, medium, or hard, I think. I think those are it. Alright, so right now for the tutorial, we will set that to 0, and 0 is peaceful. PvP, so if you want to enable player versus player on your server, I always leave that as true. Resource pack, you can put in the download link to a resource pack, and that will put the prompt on when someone joins your server. Hey, we're all using this resource pack, why don't you try it? You can just click yes or no to install the resource pack. So we will just leave the resource pack as nothing there, because I don't need to enable a resource pack. So spawn animals, we'll leave that as true. That means the server is allowed to spawn the passive and non-aggressive animal mobs. Level seed, before you start your server, you can choose a seed for the server to load. Not really sure what this one does, never used it before. Level type, default, don't change that, just don't change it. So, the last thing is your MOTD. And this one that's the message that pops up under a server in your server list on Minecraft. So we'll do making Minecraft easier. So now with that in there, that means that the MOTD for the server when we start it up in Minecraft will say making Minecraft easier. Alright, we'll just save the file. We can close it. Alright, so that's saved. Now the whitelist, that's another option that I didn't go over in the server config because you can just edit that from within the game. The whitelist means only a certain amount of certain people that you put on there, their usernames will be able to join. So for me, I'm the only one that can join. But first we have to turn that on in game. Alright, the ops. Here we're going to put in my username again. And I saved it. Alright, so that means when I log in, I'm going to be an op. Alright, so that's a help file. I'm not going to go over that. Permissions, that's only if you're going to be using Bukkit permissions. I highly suggest you don't use it if you don't know much about running a Bukkit server. Alright, so the band players. So this is the format that it will be in. It'll say their username right here, the date they were banned, who banned them, how long they're banned for, and the reason they were banned. So these last two will only be used if you use certain plugins. So same thing for banned IPs, except the victim name won't be a username, it will be their IP. Alright, so these ones here, those are all the world files. I'll go over one part because it's really the only one I know about, and that is the players. So once a player joins, they will have a file in here, and I guess it's a way of showing yourself who's joined your server. Alright, so we'll just go back again. Alright, so the logs. This is your server log. If you are trying to figure out an error and how to fix it online, you'll be able to look at your logs to look at the error that gets printed in the config, or the console. Just a way of helping depict issues, and there'll be chat logs, as long as you don't have a plugin that makes its own chat log. And the plugins folder, we will be going over all the different plugins we can choose from. There's literally hundreds of thousands of plugins out there, and there's so many useful ones, but we will be going over that in a separate video. Alright, so that's everything. We're going to run the server, and I will meet you in Minecraft. Okay, so I'm sorry, the GUI is a little small, but alright, we're in Minecraft, and we can see here in our console that the server started up successfully, and it says done. It started up in 1.668 seconds, so that's fast, and you always want that to be low. That time will change depending on how many plugins you have and how server intensive they are. Alright, so in multiplayer, we're going to do direct connect, and we will put in localhost. Join server. Alright, and there we go. We'll see. There I am. I joined the game from localhost. There's my IP, localhost. So we are in the game, and as we set in the configs, we are an op. So yeah, we've got all the op commands. We can ban people. We can ban an IP address. We can look at the help. We can de-op people. We can op people. There's tons of stuff we can do. So that is how to create a Minecraft Bukkit server. And in the future, just a few things. We'll be going over tutorials for plugins. So, as I said, some essential plugins. One of them, the one that I recommend, even before the tutorial videos are out for plugins, make sure you install Essentials. There's already tons of tutorials out there, so I suggest you watch one if you don't know what Essentials is. But this has been how to make a Minecraft Bukkit server. Thanks for watching, guys.